Hello, all you beautiful souls. I wanted to talk about the concept of conscious versus unconscious. And let's kind of explore that a little bit because I feel like we hear this a lot, but what does it actually mean? And there's different interpretations, there's different levels of consciousness, even within exploring consciousness or expanding consciousness, right? Someone can talk to you about expanding consciousness and they're going to have their own limits in their own consciousness, because we all do. So the way that I kind of like to think about conscious versus unconscious is to use some sort of tangible, real world examples. I like metaphors, right? So I think about consciousness and I think about the mind, the brain. And I think about the fact that we use 10% of our consciousness consciously, 10% of our mind, our brain consciously, and 90% unconsciously. 90% of what's going on, right, in here is unconscious. To me, this is also a reflection of the world then, right? I mean, that's kind of like pretty simple math, I would think, or, a pretty simple connection to make. If each of us are only seeing 10% for ourselves, then we're kind of only seeing 10% of the whole, right? So group consciousness is only about 10% conscious and the other 90% unconscious, right? So 90% of what's going on here on Earth, as far as human perspective, human consciousness, right? So this is another big part of it, or piece of it, is that we're talking only about human consciousness here. So far, human consciousness is 10% conscious, 90% unconscious. Now, what are we even talking about? Conscious, unconscious, right? Here's an example. Don't know how many of you saw the movie What the Bleep, right? I'm thinking, when did it come out? Like 2005, maybe? This was a really big illustration, a lot about quantum physics and how matter really maneuvers itself and how much our consciousness affects it, right? And it is subject to what our consciousness perceives is happening. But one of the things it really did illustrate that I thought was really, really clear was that our mind is taking in way more than we are aware of. That's conscious of, aware of, right? So if I were to step into a situation where I'm in the forest, let's say, and there's several different animals, there's a person talking to me, there's all kinds of different trees and plants and, all kinds of things happening, right? But the thing that I'm aware of, or the things that I'm aware of, right, are about 10% consciously aware of, right? So maybe that's like the human talking to me. Maybe he's some type of guide through the jungle forest. Maybe there's a snake that's potentially dangerous. I'm aware of that. I'm aware of the big tree that's offering me shade, right? But there's like all this other stuff going on. If we were to take me in that situation, take the individual who's been to the forest, who only remembers a few things, and we were to put them in a like light hypnosis state, into a meditation or visualization state, we would kind of be shifting their consciousness right? Into a slower brainwave. And they would be able, I would say, can you now picture the jungle, the forest? How many things, if you're picturing it now, how many things, now that you're in this slower, deeper state of consciousness, how many things can you remember? Maybe the person remembers like, oh, there was a bird flying overhead. I think it was a harpy eagle if we're in the jungle, right? There were actually 2 monkeys, but I was only aware of one. There's I think it's a mango tree that the monkey's getting a mango from. That's why it's there. I hear the faint sound of water, which I thought was wind at the time. So these kinds of things, right? And you notice my voice is getting a little bit quieter because I actually started to kind of go into a deeper state of consciousness. So my voice got calmer. So we have different brain waves for different states of consciousness. And the deeper we get in consciousness, the sort of slower our brain waves are moving. And then we're able to access more of our consciousness when they're going a little bit slower. That's why we're able to do more healing in hypnotic meditative states, because we're able to access more of our consciousness. So if I think about like, okay, a pie, for instance, and I've got my piece, maybe it's Thanksgiving, I don't know. I've got my piece of the pumpkin pie, and I know exactly what my piece looks like. I haven't started eating it yet, but if I start eating it, then I know what it tastes like and all that stuff too, right? But I know my piece. I don't know the rest of the pie. Maybe I didn't even see the rest of the pie. Somebody just brought me this piece. So this is one way we can look at it, right? Is that like we're working with a sliver of consciousness. That's what the 10% is. It's a sliver, right? And there's a lot of important stuff in that sliver. And a lot of it becomes, what we really know to be true about reality, about ourselves, how we define ourselves within reality, right? Our identities, what makes us comfortable, what makes us safe. So when we start to expand consciousness, what we're doing is we're starting to look at the rest of the pie, right? And we're starting to notice things about the rest of the pie. And there could be a lot of information in there, a lot of ingredients. Some of the pie could be falling apart. Some of it, could have some extra ingredients we didn't expect in it, right? Another metaphor or example is if we think about the ocean and the surface of the ocean, right? We get one perspective with the surface of the ocean, which is probably about 10%, right? It's a very small amount versus like the depth of the ocean available, right? So we start thinking about, we can see what's happening here. We can, see some whales, some dolphins jumping if they're coming up out of the water, seals, sea lions, aquatic creatures, right? If we go below the water, we're going to get infinitely more creatures, beings, doing all kinds of different things. In fact, just last year, I think they discovered like 5 or 6 new under deep water species, right? So great example of the unconscious. There's a bunch of stuff here and we don't really know all of it. even within our own consciousness. So it's true about the world as a whole. We're still discovering, and we're uncovering, because there's a lot of things that we've been told that were stories because those who had power wanted a specific outcome, right? And without even getting kind of into conspiracy theory and stuff like that, we know this is true when we look at history books and Columbus. We don't do Columbus Day anymore. Why not? Well, so there's little places and big places where we've been told different stories, right? And so the underneath, the unconscious, has got a lot more information, a lot more story, a lot more to show us, to teach us. So that's why when we expand consciousness, we don't want to just expand consciousness in terms of, we want to expand our psychic abilities and talk to the angels and the ETs, but we want to expand our consciousness within us, because remember, we individually are not accessing 90% of our own information, our own story. And that's part of us, right? That's us. That's me. I want to know what I don't know about me. There might be parts of me that need healing in that 90%. There might be parts of me believing stories that aren't true in that 90%, that are limiting how I see things, that are limiting how I view things. Okay, so this is why personal healing is so important. Also, because the next place we're going to go with this conversation is that we are all part of the group consciousness. So just for a moment, we'll say we're all part of the group human consciousness. So this is the first part. So when we do our personal work, we're bringing healed whole consciousness to the group, right? The other part is that we do not own consciousness on planet Earth. We are not, or in creation, we are not the only consciousness here. Plants have their own consciousness. Animals have their own consciousness. Right? Those are two big kingdoms here. Water has its own consciousness, and this planet is mostly water. And guess what else is mostly water? Me, my body, your body, our bodies. So going into the unconscious means going into the water. Water is a conductor. So whatever's going on in the unconscious, we want to bring it to the forefront because it's conducting energy for us. Our thoughts are being conducted. Water's a superconductor, right? So we want to be intentional with what we're thinking, with what we're feeling, with what we're manifesting, creating in our life. We want to be intentional because it's being conducted into the world. Right? But just for a minute, backing up, plants have their own consciousness. These guys back here in the video, right? They communicate differently than you and I do. But they have their own consciousness. And plants are actually a bigger part of the planet than humans are. So part of us expanding our consciousness is to be able to go into this place. The ideal goal, I think, is to be able to go into this place of unity and oneness, right? So that means not only expanding my personal consciousness, meaning bringing those unconscious parts forward into the conscious parts, but it also means bringing it to the group consciousness, so the group consciousness can evolve and change, and we can all kind of discover these truths together. But then it also means expanding the consciousness into the other 90% of Earth consciousness, which is the plant consciousness, which is the water consciousness, which is the animal consciousness. I want you to really think about that for a minute. Really think about, what does it mean to really be in unity with all the consciousness on earth, not just the human consciousness? What does it mean to really share oneness with the plant kingdom, with the earth, with the soil, with the knowledge and wisdom within the earth, within the water? What does it mean to really share wisdom with my animal friends? To honor their wisdom, even though it might be different than the way that my wisdom works, right? So we need to kind of think about like Avatar for a minute, right? The movie, most people have seen the movie Avatar. I would say this is not far off. And in fact, this might kind of be like a little bit of a hijacking, right? And distortion. But this idea that everything is interconnected, the way it was on planet Pandora, right? That is, think about that for a minute in terms of Earth, and being able to commune and communicate and connect with all life here, and it all being part of you, part of me, part of us. That's what creates the harmony, the harmonious utopian planet that we're all craving, right? And that many star seeds remember. Going into the unconscious, though, is not always fun. It usually requires quite a bit of shadow work. It requires the willingness to go through what I can only describe as ego deaths, right? The disillusion of how I am and have been knowing myself or knowing the world, and allowing it to expand. Knowing that I don't die with that. The perspective doesn't die with that, but it shifts, it changes, it expands. And I expand as part of it. We're all part of it. But we're not the beginning or end of anything, right? And it's not that it's part of us. We're part of all of it. So food for thought about conscious versus unconscious, and there'll be plenty more videos regarding this subject. We can go into brainwave frequencies. We can, go into shifting and changing beliefs and perspectives and why that's so important and how to do that. And all of those could be considered, every time we change a belief, it can be considered a little ego death, because we're changing what we believe something to be or how we believe something to be, and our identity is attached to that. So when we start to really kind of change how we think and feel a lot, we start to kind of go like, well, then what am I, or who am I, right? But we don't have to lose our self. Our perspective, our consciousness as it expands, right? It's like going from a single point in the center to stretching and growing awareness, but we're still with it. We're still part of it. It's just changing. Right? I hope that makes sense to everybody. I hope that it can inspire everybody. I know maybe it sounds like a little bit like, ooh, daunting or scary, or I don't know, overwhelming. But I'm wanting it to sound like inviting. Like, can you spark your curiosity? Can you let your curiosity be spiked a little bit, with the idea of like, that plant could literally be my friend. These plants are my friend. These crystals have their own consciousness. These crystals are my friends, right? We really don't have to be limited. We're not limited to only communicating human to human. And one consciousness is not superior to another. All right? And when we drop into the wisdom of what other realms of consciousness within the great realm of Earth have to offer, we learn a lot. We learn a lot. And everything, here's the other thing, everything here on Earth is also a reflection of the whole of creation. The whole point is to come here and have this microcosmic experience of unity consciousness, oneness, right? So that's why everybody showed up, the crystals, the plants, the water, everybody showed up so that we could like have this embodied experience of it. Okay, food for thought. Things to explore. See if you can go, sip next to a tree or a plant, some water, your dog, and get a little bit of a different experience. As always, pleasure speaking with you, being with you, and on this journey together. So please don't forget to subscribe and hit your notification button so we can keep hanging out.